Welcome to Superhumanizer Podcast, where we promote empathy and understanding in polarizing viewpoints through stories told by people living them. Hey, wonderful Superhumanizer friends! This is Dr. Hani Chabo. Before we dive into this awesome episode, I wanted to take a moment and be real with you. So much work goes into bringing you these conversations. The research, the preparation, the production. It's a labor of love, and it's a lot of real work. If you found value in these stories, we'd love your support. Join our Patreon for as little as $10 a month. You'll get early access to episodes, extended interviews, and even direct access to Katie and I. Or you can send a one-time or recurring donation through our PayPal link. Both links are in the show notes below. You're helping us build a team to produce more content and inspire more humanity. Thank you. Now, let's get into it.
Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Superhumanizer, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of people who are working to make our world more fair, more caring, and more human. I'm Katie, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Hani Chabo. Today, we're talking about something that should be simple, but somehow isn't, the idea that genocide is bad. Our guest has spent the last year breaking down why this basic moral truth has become so hard to talk about in public.
We're so very excited to introduce Sim Kern, a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author whose latest book, Genocide Bad, Notes on Palestine, Jewish History, and Collective Liberation, just came out from Interlink Books. Yay! The only Palestinian-owned publisher in the United States. Incredible. Sim is an environmental journalist, speculative fiction writer, and activist based in Houston, Texas, who spent 10 years teaching middle school English before becoming a full-time writer. And that teaching background really shows in how they break down complex topics.
What's so amazing about Sim's story is how they went from being known as a climate fiction author to becoming one of the most powerful and influential voices for Palestinian freedom on social media. Since October 7th, 2023, their videos explaining Palestinian history and Jewish anti-Zionism have reached tens of millions of people. And they've really used their platform, which now has over 500,000 followers across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, to raise close to $500,000 in direct aid for families in Gaza. But this isn't just about social media fame or influence. Sim's work is really showing us something deeper, which is how the self-work changes the world, how really altering the way that you think about something can be socially contagious and impactful for a community.
And such a great impact. Sim has also created amazing projects that show the power of bringing people together. In 2022, they started the Trans Rights Readathon, which has raised over $250,000 for organizations that support trans people. Their climate fiction novel, The Free People's Village, imagines what Houston might look like if Al Gore had won in 2000. It's both a love letter to their city and a plan for climate justice. Sim, we're so honored you're here and giddy with excitement to talk to you about how you went from writing about imaginary futures to fighting for real change right now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And that was a lovely introduction. Y'all covered so you didn't, most people just copy paste from my website. That was uniquely crafted. That was awesome.
We're obsessed with you.
Yes, indeed. We went down the rabbit hole and we loved it. So before we get into all the awesomeness that you are today, we like to play a game with our guests called What Brings You Joy? Would you play it with us?
Yes.
Okay. Sim, my dear, what brings you joy?
Right now what's bringing my joy is my little 1.5-year-old baby just started saying, uh-oh, but she kind of says, uh-ooh. And she's really, she'll throw things on the ground so that she can say, uh-ooh. And actually yesterday I was at a going away party for one of my friends who's leaving Houston, unfortunately. It was at a third person's house who I don't really know this person. And my baby definitely walked up to a vase that was shaped like a ball on a bookshelf, pulled it off, and then threw it at the ground. And me, before I could grab her, threw it at the ground. I think she was wondering if it would bounce. This is a new material. So she threw it at the ground and then looks at me and goes, uh-oh. You're too cute. But so full of mischief.
Oh, that's
Yeah, and then I
adorable.
had to apologize for like rolling up to this person's house and immediately snatching up their stuff. It's really
Beautiful. So
That's a
beautiful.
joy.
so Katie, what is bringing you joy lately?
Well, first of all, that story just made my
Oh yeah.
uterus scream at me, like shriek at me. Oh my God. I
Baby.
want a baby. It's fine. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna happen for me. But something that's bringing me a lot of joy, being in the presence of other writers and thinkers and creatives who are so committed to liberation work, even when they receive criticism or feedback that the work is not for them, because the work of collective liberation, as you describe in your book, is by definition collective. It is for all of us. So something that's bringing me a lot of joy is knowing that that is a shared psychic experience among the three of us. I'm really excited to talk about that today. And honey, my love, what is bringing you joy?
This conversation is already bringing me joy, and seeing these thumbnails together is bringing me a lot of joy. Being here with you, Sim, specifically is bringing me a lot of joy today, because you probably don't know this, but in the very beginning of the horrible time after October 7th, back then when everything exploded, you popped up in my feed just like Katie did. You know, I think a lot of us suddenly connected with each other around that time. And when I was envisioning this podcast and like started interviewing people, I went into one of your videos and I posted a comment and said, Sim, please come on our podcast. We'd love to interview you. And of course, like it was like part of the flood of comments you were getting, right? Thousands of comments. And, you know, I was hoping you'd see it. Of course, like I completely understand, because I don't see a lot of comments under my videos either. And what I loved back then is that there was like 2,000 likes to that comment. Like people just really wanted to see more of you. Our podcast still hadn't been known yet, you know, and people just were so hungry to see more of you. So you being here, sharing your time with us, full circle, it's finally happened. That's bringing me a lot of joy. Back to you, my dear. What's bringing you joy?
Oh, I go again.
Yes, we're going to do three rounds.
times.
Oh God, I only prepared one. Wait, now I have to think. What else is joyful? Oh my God. Okay, this is like a really little thing.
Yes.
It's one of those things I've been like, because I've been trying to think about like what could I like, because I'm so careful. I only have one brand partnership, and so sometimes I'll think like, what company would I even feel good about? And like pickled onions, you guys. I would be a brand spokesperson for pickled onions. Listen, you make a sandwich, you put the pickled onions with the lime, the pickled red onions with the lime. You put that on a sandwich. It takes an extra second. It's a next level sandwich now.
Yep.
I make a lot of beans because it's like cheap, and I try to kind of be plant-based. Fail at that a lot of the time, but you put some pickled onion brine and garnish your beans with some pickled, it elevates it. There's so many dishes you can just elevate with pickled onions. And I feel like I've been sleeping my whole life on pickled onions, and I'm really into them right now.
Wow.
Love that for you.
All right, Katie, what's bringing you joy?
Oh, congratulations. You know, I was going to do a more serious one, but I'll save the more serious one for my heart share, because honestly, I'm in Paris right now, and Prosecco. Every time I go and get a meal, I'm having like a glass or two of Prosecco, and I'm sitting at these chic little Parisian tables, like journaling by myself, like solo hot girl in Paris, sipping her Prosecco. And I feel so powerful and like mighty. I feel like I have the sex appeal of 1,000 suns while I'm in Paris. So the Prosecco was helping. Bringing me a lot of joy. Honey, my
Beautiful.
love, what is bringing you
Cheers
joy?
to that. Cheers to that.
If I'd known we were going to be drinking, I would have brought a mimosa.
This is
I
juice.
water.
I swear, this is clementine juice.
Okay.
I have coffee, so you're good. I will also say, like, pickled onions, you're talking to, you know, a Lebanese guy who grew up eating pickled onions and pickled everything with every single meal. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for highlighting how delicious they are. And on the note of pickled onions, another animal that loves pickled onions that brings me a lot of joy these days is goats. So recently, I moved to the forest, which in hindsight, if I knew all the things about living in the forest, I may not have done it, but I'm really enjoying living in the forest. And my neighbors have goats who used to live on the property that I bought. And they went on a sabbatical. So they're like, hey, you have the setup already for goats. Do you mind babysitting them for us? And there's 6 goats. And I said, yes, of course. I've always wanted to have farm animals. So I've been living for the last month with 6 goats who just like roam around the property. And you can see them from like every single window. And they bring me a lot of joy because they're so silly. Like out of nowhere, the other day, me and my husband were outside doing things. And like every 5 minutes you hear like, like out of nowhere. And they just do the silliest things. They do that to each other. I don't know if they're doing that to like ward off mosquitoes. They're also like really loving. Like they'll come up to you and want to be, petted and fed. And they're just really silly and they're communal. And they do a really good job of goatscaping, which is like the bigger reason why we said yes, is they'll eat all the weeds around the house and they'll protect us from fires because they take care of all the weeds that can catch fire. And so for protection and for silliness and just for the darn sake of having farm animals, goats are bringing me joy. Back to you, my dear. One more. What brings you joy?
I don't know how I can follow up on babysitting goats. That's awesome. I would love that. Goats are
You're
so
welcome
clever.
to come here anytime.
Their square eyeballs are so alien. I think they're the most alien looking animals.
Yes, they are.
Okay, I'm just going to go with what I was telling you guys about before this show, which is this thrift store find. It's a Garfield shirt that's definitely from the 80s because it came with shoulder pads stitched in the same fabric as this shirt. And it's all like full Garfield panels, like 4 across. Like you can read them like. And actually the story of how I got this with my husband and I, because we have all 3 of our kids home with us, not in school, not in daycare all summer. So in order to like have a date, like once a month, we pay our eldest daughter to like babysit for like a good chunk of time. We make plans. We were going to go to like an adult pool, like one of these adult pools with the bar and everything. But then it was like raining on our date. We didn't have a backup plan. So we like went out to eat and we went thrift store shopping and I got this Garfield shirt. It was a really fun time.
Yay. So. I love that.
So cute.
Yeah,
great ending to that story.
We're doing one more. So now to
last
Katie
one.
again. Katie again.
Okay, something that is bringing me my joy. I have a writing retreat coming up in October with Hannah of Interlink.
I want to go.
Me
I'm so
too.
jealous.
With us. Come with us. I
can't.
cannot wait. And
So many
so
children.
Hannah's well, that's true. Yeah, you have the whole trio of kiddos to consider, but Hannah's going to give craft workshops and we're doing a Q&A and Hannah's the writer in residence. So we get to talk about their work. And I'm so excited. And we already have, I think 8 or 9 people registered. So we still have like 15 or 16 spots and are trying to fill because the proceeds from this retreat are going to a fund for emerging like Palestinian writers. And I'm just really.
Is this
really
the Interlink Fund? Is it like.
I think I'm not allowed to announce that yet, so we'll probably have to edit this piece out. But if they've dropped that it exists, then great. If they've dropped that it exists by the time this episode is out,
by the time we'll keep it in there.
Yes. Yeah. And we can
Great
keep
cause,
all of this in.
I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a fantastic cause that I won't name right now, but yeah, 100%.
Because it's still like paperwork stuff. Like everything is filed quite yet.
Exactly. And so trying to figure out how to make this process sustainable. So in the future, as I do these trips with Tour Hero 2, I can continue having writers in residence who are Palestinian. And so I'll pay their airfare and get them there. And then they'll be sort of sharing their craft and insight. And this will be hopefully an ongoing partnership with the funds coming out going to support the Interlink Fund. So assuming they are public by the time this happens, cool. But for now, it's just Hannah and I experimenting and seeing how it goes. Yeah. All right. Honey, darling. All you. What's your last joy?
Amazing. I'm really hoping that it comes out before, like, so when we post this, it would have already come out the news because that whole what just happened right now was so endearing and so hilarious between both of you. Um, but my last joy, I would say, is I'm going to like piggyback on your first joy, Sim, which is children, kids. I don't have kids of my own, but I definitely have a theoretical uterus that screams sometimes that I want kids. And recently I've gone into seeing more kids in my mental health practice, and I'm in a fellowship for child and adolescent psychiatry to deepen that skill in my toolbox. And I've recently started seeing some kids who really needed help. And it's bringing me a lot of not just joy, but hope that we are in an era today that's paying attention to kids not getting what they need when they're children. And being with both of you, like your inner childs are just so apparent. Like you're both profound, scholars and the author, and like you're just like amazing human beings who your inner children is so alive. And I know you are doing that for your kids. Some look at that shirt. Exactly. And Katie, I'm so excited for you when you have kids. And for me, what's bringing me joy is that if I never have kids of my own, that I could pour some of that, my inner child, and what was given to me, and to give that back to the children I see in my practice. So that brings me joy.
I love that so much, babe. Ugh.
Thank you.
The children are everything. Okay, yeah. I am going to dive us on into our interview questions about the making of an activist. So, Sim, in your book, you write about how your journey as an activist began when you realized as a teenager that, and I'm quoting here, global warming would blow up our planet one day. And this realization happened back in 1999 when climate change wasn't as much of a mainstream activist conversation. You've said that understanding the climate crisis became an entry point for understanding that our global system was catastrophically racist, colonial, and capitalist. Can you take us back to the moment when you were first able to connect these dots? What was it like being a teenager who saw the connections that most of the adults around you weren't making yet?
It was very, very lonely and isolating. And I didn't have the internet, I mean, I think I had AIM.
Yep.
AOL Instant Messenger for you younglings. I could go in a chat room, but it wasn't like this. You couldn't like find people who were concerned about the things that you were concerned about in 1999. I didn't know how to. So I was I just felt really alone with this. I just absorbed enough media to have realized that like everywhere you look, the environment was in decline and nothing was being done about it. And this global warming thing was a really serious problem. And I wanted to do things like be vegetarian, be more ethical in my consumption, just like get the people in my house to like turn the lights off more, like make those small lifestyle changes, which as like a child was like the only things I felt like I could do. But like no one was on board with it. Everyone made fun of me. I grew up in the era of like Saved by the Bell was like very much of my generation. And there was this character, Jessie, who was like an environmentalist, and she was such a joke. It was just, the same thing with like Hermione and Harry Potter with trying to end slavery. And she got so much shit for it,
Wow.
J.K. Rowling, what a joke, trying to be anti-slavery. That was kind of the vibe in the 90s of, the era of grunge. Apathy was cool. And showing any earnestness, being offended by things, being, an engaged citizen. All these things were viewed as like very uncool in popular media. And there was no social media yet to like push back on that. And, so it was just very, very isolating.
Yeah. I mean, I think that loneliness too is something that the internet has both exacerbated and tried to solve simultaneously. And so I talk to people whose online work has made them feel, much, much more isolated in terms of being viewed as a real person rather than just a mouthpiece or a talking head. And also feeling like they're able to network. So I am hearing your pre-internet isolation and wondering how much that has really changed. But it is fascinating. Like your environmental awakening really led you to question so much about how the world works. I mean, you speak in your work over and over again about the systems that contribute to these types of harm and violence. And that system-oriented thinking has really shown up in the way that you approach conversations about Palestine now. So you don't just talk about individual events, but about the bigger structures that have made these events possible.
I have to tell you about like a story, again, another like pre-internet story of how I started actually connecting those dots. Because I was this like budding environmentalist and didn't have like a political like a anti-capitalist analysis until I was in high school. And my friend and I were like sitting at a table in Borders books, just like giggling and being teen girls and being silly. And this like older boy who was like slightly older than us, like college age. I thought he was really cute. And he tossed a copy of Adbusters magazine on the table. I'm not shitting you. And he goes, read this. It'll blow your mind. Like, because we were like silly teen girls. And he's like, read this. It'll blow your mind. But I did. I bought it. I was like, because I was like, who is this clown? What is this Adbusters magazine? But it was like an anti-capitalist. If you don't know Adbusters, like a very old anti-capitalist magazine. And I read it and it did blow my mind. I was like, oh my God, capitalism is the reason for everything.
Well, a leftist man tried to educate someone and it worked.
Wow.
It worked. It's cringe. I know. It's like such a cringy
Amazing.
In retrospect, but it's like also a parable of like you could be that one voice that gets through to someone. Like you never know what your share is going to do. And also the power of like print media. I don't know. I'm not sure like a story share has the same impact as like handing someone a magazine. Yeah.
That's so great.
Wow.
Oh my God.
That's genuinely how I became an anti-capitalist.
Wow.
What a weird
I would have found my way there. But I made it there in like freshman year of high school because of some random guy at Borders.
Thank you, cute boy at Borders.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You contributed to the world. Like,
and to his credit, he didn't try to pick us up or anything. He was just like,
he just wanted to enlighten the world. Wow.
Yeah. So maybe a real
typical.
leftist boy.
Baby.
Yeah. Ideal.
Wow, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. I was hoping you would say more, and I'm really glad you did because that was an epic story and so powerful to say, like, really, if you are somebody who believes in something and you put it out there, you don't know what kind of response you might get. I mean, I hope that maybe this boy is listening and knows that he did that for you and sees what an awesome accomplishment you've made in your life towards all the missions, especially that one that he was trying to like enlighten you on. So really grateful for that story.
Well, and something I haven't thought about till now is, but I talk about in the book about how it was just picking up a copy of Joe Sago's Palestine in a half-price books that led me down the path of becoming an anti-Zionist Jewish activist. So really like encounters with, that's what I hope this book will do. I get so excited. I went to my local bookstore the other day and I was just chatting because I know them there. And I was like, are people like buying it? And they're like, yeah, people are like picking it up off the shelf. Yes. People who don't know you from social media. And that's what I want so much is for people to just, when you encounter a book or a magazine or something in the wild, it can really change your mind in a way that I think that is really special, and that in our like social media digital worlds, of course you can run across like a TikTok or a reel also that changes your mind. But I think it'd be really powerful when that happens with like a printed piece of writing. So
yes,
I love the return to tangibles. There's something intellectually nostalgic about it, of like we need to hold knowledge in our hands sometimes. And what you have done with this book is really given people the ability to hold knowledge in their hands. And I know this is not where you started doing this, because you were an educator for a really long time.
Yes. You spent 10 years teaching middle school English in Houston. And you've said that experience taught you that communication is most effective when you're concise, clear, and at least occasionally funny, even when the topic is bleak. Your videos about Palestine have this incredible ability to make complex historical concepts accessible without dumbing them down. How did those years in the classroom shape the way you talk about genocide and colonialism? And what would you tell other educators who want to teach these topics but feel scared or unprepared?
Yeah, being in the classroom, I mean, the population of students I was working with, it was a largely like 99% Latina community. And so a lot of my students, maybe 30%, were English as a second language learners. So, you know, you have to really decide what is the important concept I'm trying to get across right now, right? And that may be difficult text, difficult language. Maybe what we're working on is like we're working on vocabulary. So then I'm not going to dumb down the vocabulary of the words I'm trying to teach you, but I'm going to use words that are going to be as familiar as possible to you whenever I can to teach you whatever is the target concept, right? And I think all of this has and even just like learning, there was something I learned, like there's English language dictionaries are constructed differently than traditional English dictionaries. So traditional dictionaries, when you read a definition of a word, right, it's like a weird grammatical construction. It's in a passive voice. The word isn't being used in the sentence itself. And English language learners dictionaries, it does the opposite. You also learn techniques like fast mapping, where you say if as you're talking, you use a big word and you catch yourself and you're like, my students might not know that word. You just restate the phrase again simply. So if I was like, talking about, so and so, like, even just let's say I was trying to define Zionism in a sentence. And I was like, as I've been talking to Zionists online, people who defend the state of Israel, you can just sort of automatically define things. So I think doing that for 10 years in those conditions, I just learned to communicate really clearly. And a lot of people who have written books about Palestine in the past are academics, and they study this stuff for a long time, and they learn to be so precise in their language. And they are, they've spent much, much, much more time with the primary source documents, researching it than I have, but what I can do, but spending all that time in academia, you start to talk in academia-ese, which is its own jargon. And the more time you spend in academia, the worse you get at communicating with academics.
So true. Yeah.
You kind of get brainworms. So I think that's what I did with this book. I mean, there's none of the like philosophical or historical concepts in it are particularly novel, but I'm drawing from a lot of literature that's been written on anti-Zionism and Jewish history, and just making it like you said, like really as accessible as I can to a wide audience, people who aren't academics, and like injecting that little bit of humor, a punching up humor, a pointing out the absurdity humor, that I think can kind of is a necessary pressure release when you are tackling the most horrifying topic on the face of the earth, which is genocide.
I think this is one of the differences that you're bringing out, is the difference in like a scientific orientation and a humanities orientation, where for some reason, so scientists and social scientists are like, no, you have to have every single fact and the full foundation of an immense history first before you can make any claims, which makes it really hard for any new thinker to break into that foundation or learn, because they're consuming material from people that are trying to, as you said, like lay out with precision everything that happened in a chronology. And I think what you've done with Genocide Bad is flip that temporal order. Like you have flipped the ordering of things, where someone can come in and start addressing the moral questions first of like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, how are we seeing this human evil in front of our faces, and allowing it to persist and not intervening so vehemently and so furiously? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And you bring in the foundational literature such that people can get curious about it. So you're interacting with a text that isn't above their heads, that isn't, assuming, oh, I know everything and you all know nothing. It's like, no, we all know that this is bad. And then as their curiosity is sparked about some of the other scholars that you cite in your work, they can go and dig deeper, but they don't need the depth first. They get the moral message, which is so crucial first, and then can dig as they are able.
I love that, Katie. Before people can actually do anything actionable that they feel motivated towards, that they have like a personal investment in, they have to understand it. And you're right, like the academies makes things so complicated to understand. And I think about, like, as you were both reflecting on that, I thought about like medicalese, like in the clinic when I'm speaking to a patient, I had to really learn how do I communicate this from the medical jargon I learned to like actual language that the patient can understand, because that's what's going to make the patient do the things that we're agreeing are health promoting for them, versus the patients that are like, oh, this, fancy word or this fancy medicine name or whatever it is. And you, Sim, you have such a gift for this specific thing, is like making things much more digestible, and which is just so remarkable that you did that in this book, because you really are tackling some very heavily academic concepts rooted in very important history, but you take them and you make them more accessible, and you have this gift of meeting people where they're intellectually at, while still challenging them to think deeper. And I can't help but think about how your own understanding of things actually made you unlearn things, because understanding is also what makes us unlearn. And so it makes me think about how you've had to unlearn things like Zionist indoctrination.
Mm-hmm. And in Genocide Bad, you've been so honest about your own journey of unlearning this Zionist indoctrination. And you've written about how it was tough to unlearn Zionist indoctrination about settler colonialism, apartheid, and occupation in Palestine. That was part and parcel of growing up Jewish in the US. And you also mentioned that you never felt that mystical connection to the Holy Land that Zionists have wanted you to feel or tried to get you to feel. What was the unlearning process like for you personally? And how do you balance honoring your Jewish identity, which you absolutely do, while rejecting Zionism, knowing what Zionism means for your community and really our community?
Yeah, I give a lot of reasons why I think leaving Zionist thinking behind was a lot easier for me than many Jews. Because I was always an outsider within my own Jewish community and my own Jewish family. We were like the least my mom's not Jewish. So like of my other Jewish relatives, we were like, it's like, are they Jewish? And it was really, like I share in the book, I didn't really think of myself as Jewish until my very Christian neighbors and community and peers started informing me that I was Jewish, and at times bullying me for being Jewish. And then I decided like, okay, well, I guess I'm Jewish, so I'm going to own that. And, I wasn't raised religious. I wasn't, my dad is very anti-religious. And actually we're like, 3 generations atheist kind of Jews. My great-grandparents were, anarchists. My great-grandmother learned English from Emma Goldman in Brooklyn. Emma Goldman, the famous anarchist, Jewish anarchist, used to teach, English, classes to newly arrived Jewish women. Wow. And that's how my great-grandmother Anna learned English. So we have I was raised with all this family history, like we were Jewish, but in this like tradition of like these radical anarchist atheist Jews.
Makes
and
total
so
sense.
That was kind of an interesting place to be, and my nuclear family definitely always, my dad is a critical thinker. He's an academic. He's a critical thinker. He encouraged that in me, but he, saw what was, and this has changed now, but when we would talk about Israel, because I didn't know the word Palestine until I went to college. When we would talk about Israel, it was like, oh yes, it's religious hate. And again, my dad's like very anti-religious, like they just hate each other because of religion. And truly that was like ignorance on all of our parts. My grandfather, who was a communist, like a card-carrying communist, loved Israel because he believed in the propaganda of the kibbutzes. And he went there and he stayed on a kibbutz and he was like, this is it. This is like the Jewish communism. And he never met a Palestinian. He never heard the story his whole life. He never heard the Palestinian narrative. It's just before social media that Israeli capture of Western media was so complete that many people, especially many people in Jewish, U.S. communities, just would go their entire lives without ever hearing about the people. And they truly believed that Israel was that Palestine was a land of a people without a land. I right on the first try. They just didn't know. So now my dad, of course, he knows, and he's on the level, and he's, heard the Palestinian narrative. But so that was really, I had an unusual Jewish childhood. And once I started hearing about the Palestinian perspective, it was very easy for me comparatively to walk away from Zionism because it wasn't so enmeshed in my identity. And I did have people in my Jewish community who were deeply associated on an ego level with Israel, and who were urging me, you have to go to Israel. You're going to the land, you're going to love the land. And, I knew people who had gone there and kissed the ground, and it just gave me the ick always. It gave me I just felt that there was something false behind it. I've always had a good sense for this. I hated, Santa Claus and mascots as a kid. Like anytime someone was in a costume, I hated people in costumes, like I could always that gives me the ick. And so, that's just what it felt like. And it felt like the same as like when, Christians would try to, testify to me. It was just like, this isn't for me.
I can imagine how you felt about the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem based on what you just said. Yeah. All of this resonates quite deeply in terms of the messaging fed to us about Palestine or the lack thereof, and not really knowing. I had never heard the word Palestine until I got to college either. I'm also a patrilineal Jew. Like your narrative feels very close to home for me. My family is unfortunately not as like radical tikkun olam, anarchist, atheist, Jewish background. That's not so much ours, but I so appreciate learning more about the familial threads that are also woven into your justice orientation. Like clearly these people who you come from contributed to the genetic material that made you give a shit about other people. And you really, you borrow from their scholarship too. So you have this whole research background. And when you were writing your book, Genocide Bad, this ability to engage with scholarship really positioned you because you'd been researching Jewish history for a novel set in 17th century Europe, which unveiled a lot of historical parallels for you between Jewish and Palestinian experiences. And you've mentioned before that many Ashkenazi Jews in the US know little about our history in Europe prior to the Holocaust. That ignorance is intentionally cultivated by Zionist historical institutions because a deeper appreciation of our European roots would disrupt Zionist propaganda. How would a deeper appreciation of our European roots as Ashkenazi Jews disrupt Hasbara propaganda?
Yeah, well, because Europe was our home, babes, for over 1,000 years, for at least like 1,500. If you're an Ashkenazi Jews, you were in Europe for at least 1,500 years. And before that, who knows? Okay. I am not convinced by the genetic. I talk about in the book. I am not at all convinced by either genetic or archaeological science that my ancestors ever were in the Levant. Probably maybe one great grandpa, but the vast majority of this is European, is indigenous to Europe, right? And I think the same is true for most Ashkenazi Jews, but that people get upset about that. But it seems pretty obvious to me. And, as Jews, we're just raised to think of Europe as it was this miserable stopping off point where we were just constantly persecuted and massacred and murdered, and there's so little curiosity about, it's like, okay, destruction of the second temple, kicked out, as the myth goes. There's no archaeological evidence of this, but the story is there was then a mass migration of Jews into Europe. The Holocaust. You know what I mean? What happened there? You know what I mean? that's like a lot of time. That's like 1800, that's a long time, almost 2,000 years. What happened? We're not curious. We don't care. We don't think that those were our homes when we lived there for like tens of generations. So I just think that is intentionally cultivated by Zionism. And also the story of us in Europe is very much growing up Jewish in America, or in the US, you get tons of Holocaust propaganda. So mostly what you learn about your relatives in Europe is that we died horribly. We were massacred and tortured and exiled and killed horribly. There's just so many, I talk about in my book, there's like 180 books for children in print right now, over 180 books about the Holocaust for children. Do you know how many books there are about Jews like not being persecuted, but like the Jews who just like live their lives in Europe? And so when I got curious about, let's look at a time when like things were like okay for Jews. And the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, before the Russians invaded Poland and took it over, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was this very interesting place where like the monarchy was very sort of egalitarian, and they had bent the knee to the Christian church, but kind of like just for political reasons. And like it was a strangely egalitarian place for early modern Europe. You had like Romani people who ascended to the rank of nobles and advisors to the king. You had Jews who were also upper class and lower class. And I think looking at the Ottoman Empire was also really interesting at this time because it was another place where Jews and Romanis and Christians and Muslims could all be at different levels of social stratification rather than your class being attached to your race and religion as it was in like the Holy Roman Empire. So I found that really interesting. And then as I wanted to write about this time when things were a comparatively chill for Jews. But then as I was looking at it, what I saw was in places where Jews had more access to wealth, they became complicit in the oppression of others. In ways that I was like, it seems silly to me now, but I was like shocked by it at the time. Like I was shocked to learn about how Jews in the Ottoman Empire would run schools for slaves to teach slave girls who were mostly teenage girls kidnapped from, like Russia, what is now Russia, like Slavic, blonde-haired, blue-eyed teenage girls were preferred by Jewish families as like a status symbol to have blonde hair and blue eyes. A slave who was blonde hair and blue eyes. These slaves had to be like sexually available to the Jewish head of the household at all times. Wow. And they would run schools to like teach them to keep a kosher house. And then there was this whole like branch of like rabbinical writings and Talmudic commentary about how to treat your slaves among the Jews in the Ottoman Empire, where slave ownership was common among Jews, right? And to me, this was just, and this isn't in the medieval period. This is in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. So that was just shocking to me that like in a place where Jews could own slaves, they were definitely owning slaves and just doing what the other wealthy people were doing. So it really deepened my analysis as an anarchist that like power is truly what corrupts people and leads to evil. And that there's no identity group that's like exempt from that. And so when you look at these different, parts of Europe and you see how much access did Jews have to wealth, kind of correlates to how much evil were we up to. Because it's the wealth, not your religion or your ethnicity or something else that leads people to do evil things and oppress other people.
And what you're saying speaks precisely against the chronic victim narrative, which I find really violent and degrading and upsetting about Jewish people of like, no, we've never done harm a single day in our lives. We're just the group that harm happens to. And it's like, it's frightening because it does ingrain this sense of chronic perceived victimhood of like, I'm at risk all the time. And it also stops any kind of critical analysis against our own capacity for violence, particularly identity-based violence to another marginalized group or an out-group. I'm so appreciative that you just shared that context and that history.
Yeah.
Yeah, you blew my mind, to be honest. Like I didn't know 90% of what you just shared about the history of Jews in Europe. And I always think about how even as Arabs and, being on the other side of the border with Israel, growing up there and seeing like the demonization of people according to ethnicity, when it goes back to this power piece, Israel is a powerful country and it's backed by powerful countries. And that power is what corrupts people. And regardless of that facade, at the end of the day, it's that power. And I think the same way about like extremism. Extremism hijacks religion and wears the face of religion, and then we vilify the religion or we vilify the ethnicity. And really what we should be looking at is these like bigger structures that are causing the evil to come out in these groups, no matter what group it is or what religion it is. And it really, like what you said about just them being in a position of power, which helped them in a way almost like connect to the systems of oppression and evil that were happening in Europe, which then made them vilified. Like I had no idea. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And, the way that you educate, this is why we asked you that question. And the way that you educate is just so unique to you. You made us laugh while you were explaining that to us, for sure. So uniquely you. And October 7th, 2023 was a turning point for you. That's when you started making educational videos about Palestine and anti-Zionism. It's also when you started writing about it. And Hannah Mushabek from Interlink Publishing specifically mentioned your video about how no one deserves an ethno-state as a foundational idea that has propelled this movement for Palestinian liberation. That video and others like it have reached millions of people. Can you tell us more about making that first video? Did you have any idea that would have the impact it did? And how did it feel to suddenly become what you call a reluctant influencer for Palestine?
I did not. That video was also off the cuff in a hotel room. I was in the middle of a shitstorm because the biggest video, the video I did that got like 20 million views, I had posted like 2 or 3 days before.
Huh.
And that was about just saying like, if you see Israelis as people, but you don't see Palestinians as people, that is because of white supremacy. So that video I had posted a few days before, and it got 20 million views. It was blowing up. It was being stitched in all kinds of places. I was being an internet main character, and I was making a couple like quick off the cuff follow-up videos to like clarify certain things. And I actually made that video. I had just landed for my book tour for the Free People's Village. I was in Boston. I was supposed to meet my editor in like half an hour to go grab a meal. And I just had like a little bit of time. So I just like set my phone down on the little hotel room table and filmed that real quick. And I did it after, because as I was on the plane, I had reception. So I must have been in the car or something on the way there. I had seen a video by a Jewish leftist that I had been following for a long time, who, by the way, has since gotten on board. I don't know if it was my video that did it, but this Jewish leftist was saying, I get it. Israel, there's so much to criticize about Israel, but Jews deserve a homeland. He was trying to do the both sides thing and be like, I feel for the Palestinians. I'm critical of Netanyahu, but Jews deserve a homeland. And I was just like, no, they don't. Like, no, who gets a homeland? Who gets an like a theocratic ethno-state, which is what Israel is, right? It's both, because Jewishness to Israel is both a race, ethnicity, and religion, depending on when it's convenient for their narrative, right? So this is a racial apartheid, theocratic, because of the religion, even though it's kind of bullshit that they don't really follow the religion, ethno-state. And yeah, when you put it in those terms, I think it sounds much, when you say like apartheid, theocratic, ethno-state, it sounds a lot harsher than when you say Jews deserve a homeland, which was something a lot of people were saying back then. So I think it was just rephrasing it in that way and being like, just think about this for a second. Like, a homeland for Jews? No, we don't do that, And the response I get to that video, in very bad faith, I still get this response all the time, is like, don't Muslims have a homeland? Don't Arabs have a homeland? They have 27 countries or whatever it is that are, Muslim majority. But, I'm an anarchist. I'm against all states. Like, I think all, like, borders is like.
No nation, no borders.
Yeah.
So that's where the disconnect comes. There are some people, though, who can't imagine that kind of, liberation. Yeah. And so they think, well, if there's not a Jewish ethno-state there, then the only other option is a Sharia law Muslim ethno-state, Arab ethno-state there, which is like, that binary is all they can imagine. So one of my great quests in life is like breaking down false binary thinking.
Yes. Yes. I love the statement too of, if you cannot imagine a better world, you will not be one of the people to create it. Like, gray thinking and more creative imagining is so necessary for movements like this. So yeah, thank you for bringing in the binary just to break it apart. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so powerful. Really, again, like quintessentially Sim. I remember in that video also, like, you talking about the Romani people, which blew my mind. I'd never really thought of the Romani people as a good example of, a similar parallel there of, these people have been prosecuted and discriminated against for centuries, still are. And even, there was a Romani Holocaust by the Nazis even. So do we go and say like, okay, yeah, all the Romani people now deserve a state, and then go and like take that away from an already established land with an already established people? And, as an Arab who comes from Lebanon, who also has Palestinian roots, none of these countries that are called, Muslim countries are actually fully Muslim or really have like, Sharia law functioning through them, except if you think of like Saudi Arabia and Iran. And of course, like for me, I feel like, just like you, that's also wrong. Like, I would never want a fundamentalist, extremist, or religious group to come and run a country. I think that all countries should be ran by democracy and equal rights and all the things that we believe in. And I, like you, believe in zero borders. And for a long time, the Middle East was zero borders. And people just, didn't even recognize that there was a Lebanese and a Syrian and a Palestinian and all these kind of things that exist right now. And so why don't we just, go back to that? And your phrase, no one deserves an ethno-state, is so simple and so powerful, which is really what you do. It cuts through the complexity. It gets to the heart of the matter. And that's exactly the kind of clarity that your teaching and background brings to your book, Genocide Bad.
And we have so many questions too about the creation of this book. So Genocide Bad is a New York Times bestseller. Congratulations. And also has this incredible subtitle. So Notes on Palestine, Jewish History, and Collective Liberation. And you've written that the entire book can be boiled down to just 2 words, Genocide Bad. But then you say, genocide very fucking bad, obviously, all caps, and point out that in a logical world, this book would not need to exist. You would not have had to write it. What was it like writing a book, like penning this manifesto that argues for something that should be so obvious? And how did you decide to structure it as part memoir, part rant, and part manifesto?
So I gotta be honest, answering these questions are so difficult because I almost like blacked out for 3 months when I was writing this book. Like, I had a 6-month-old baby. Okay, so like, Hannah Mushabek asked me, it was her idea to write this book, my editor. I would never have been like, I can write a book about genocide if she hadn't asked me to. But she asked me to write it for Interlink, the only Palestinian-owned press in the US. And I was like very intimidated by this idea. I was like, I just had a baby. They were like, we can't really pay you much of anything. But I was also like immediately like, of course I have to do this. Of course I have to at least try to do this. So she asked me in May. I was like, my kids are out of school for the summer. Like, I can't during the summer. But as soon as like they go back to school, the day they go back to school, I'm gonna like hit this running. And Hannah wanted a manuscript in 6 weeks. And I, I was like, well, I'm just gonna take the transcripts of my video essays and I'll just like zhuzh them up, and it'll just be those essays. Wow. But I ended up like rewriting almost everything. And like, the book is way deeper than anything I was ever able to put on TikTok. Cause turns out when you can talk for more than like 10 minutes, you can really expand on your ideas. You know, and it has over like 300 endnotes. Like I did all this research and somehow, so my kid would go to school, my 6-month-old, I like the whole living room, I baby proofed, and I got those like those soft play cushions to make it like the children's museums. There were like little soft cushy ramps everywhere she could crawl over. And I just like wrote the book in between diaper changes. And then my spouse would come home from work and like, we would be like ships in the night. I would be like, okay, here's the baby. And I would like go to the coffee shop and work on it some more. Cause then I could get some like really focused work done. And I really like, I was recently like trying to put together like the photo album for our family. And I like have no pictures from those months. I did not form memories. I just was working on this book.
Wow.
So somehow I wrote it in 6 weeks and I really don't like even remember the process, but it was really like, I remember feeling it felt actually incredible because like having been talking about genocide for almost a year at that point, everything was at the top of my mind. All of this research was like right here and being able to put it out on a page instead of like doing it in these short snippets online where then you're like immediately getting all this feedback from people, bad faith, you know, misinterpretations of you, getting their comments, like watching 3 seconds of your video and then making all these assumptions, like just being able to write without people commenting was just amazing. And it was and it gave me a real sense of purpose. I had a feeling like I'm doing something important. I've been asked to do this by someone I really respect, who's Palestinian. Like you know, it felt good to like have work that was very, like felt like really important and purposeful. So I wrote the book in 6 weeks, got it to Hannah for feedback. She came back. The whole editing process took until about, like the very beginning of December. So we went through, you know, a couple revisions and then we were about to send it off to press. And I was just like, we'd already done copy edits even. And I was just like, I got to get this fact checked. Like, I am not affiliated with the university. Like it was copy edited and Hannah and Michelle is Hannah's dad, the dad of the Three Sisters of Interlinked books. And he's published a zillion books about Palestine. He has, you know, a ton of expertise and knows a ton of this history. So he had done some fact checking, but I was like, I really want, particularly Rashid Khalidi to look at it because a couple of the chapters on this book, I had really heavily used Rashid Khalidi's research. He wrote the 100 Years War on Palestine for those who aren't familiar. So I emailed him. We'd done an event together before. So we communicated and I was like, Rashid, can you just look at these 2 chapters, please? I just don't want to have misrepresented you. And so he was so gracious. He was actually like going on vacation with his family and like while on like his Christmas vacation with his family, sent me some notes. And then he was like, and he read like half the book. Like I had just asked him to look at these 2 chapters. We read like half the book. He sent me some notes. He was like, and there was no praise. Also, I had like a total spiral about this because he just sent like this page, this is wrong. This page, check this. This page, think about this more. And I was like, wow. Ah! And Hannah was like, no. That's Arab dad. That's like, if he thought it was shit, he would not have done it. She was like, don't expect any praise. So, and he was like, I am on vacation with my family. Like, I have a feeling his wife was like, you gotta stop working on it. Like, he was like, I have to stop, but I'm gonna give you over to Nadim Bawalsa. So then we paid Nadim Bawalsa, who's associate editor of the Journal of Palestine Studies, to fact check the whole thing. So even though it was like about to go to press, we like did this process where we were like, pause, let's get this right. Let's get this fact checked. Let's make sure it's airtight. And so we got it fact checked. And Nadim also did it literally over Christmas, between like December 24th and December 27th. Was when Nadim was fact checking it. And I was very honored that these 2 scholars felt like this book was worth their precious time off over the holidays, you know, to look at. And so then I felt good about it and it was like, okay, we can send it off for us. And then after my like spiral about Rashid, he ended up emailing me like a week or 2 later being like, how's it going with Nadim? Like, I'm very eager for this book to come out quickly.
Yay!
He did like it.
Yay!
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm listening to you speak about this with hearts and stars in my eyes because the idea of writing a book of this quality in 6 weeks and just, that's such incredible work. And I mean, in addition to the support that you've gotten and the sort of external validation and affirmation of like, no, this is valuable and has to be out there, you've still talked about having imposter syndrome while you wrote the book.
Oh, yeah.
Curious why that was, what helped you to overcome it, because truly, thank God you did. And thank God you put it out there.
And again, it's like, I was like, there's a presumption here, right? Like I'm doing scholarship. This is a work of serious scholarship. But I am not a university affiliated scholar. I have a master's degree in public school education, right? Like I know how to research something and cite it and like do the footnotes and everything. And I did it 300 times in this book. But
yes.
But like I'm outside academia. And I think there's a great power. And then so in my moments of confidence, I think there's a great import and a power in that. And I actually think it's really great and wonderful that we're starting to see more freelance scholars, especially as we've seen over the past year and a half, how much these institutions are invested in the status quo, and invested in like the weapons manufacturing industry status quo. And so academics are really held hostage. Their livelihoods are held hostage. And the fact that I make my living off crowdfunding and brand deal on social media that is not associated with Raytheon and Lockheed Martin frees me up to be a more radical thinker, a more radical scholar. And I think we need that. So yeah, I think on the one hand, like, being I was always a freelance journalist, I've never been a staff writer for a newspaper either that's been invested. Being a freelance journalist, being a freelance scholar, I think these are legitimate and important roles that we need in society. And at the same time, though, it's like, I don't have institutional bank. I can't be like, I'm affiliated with Harvard, it's a lot of people will question you and question your credentials. That's the main thing. Like sometimes I go look for funsies at the like 1-star reviews of my book. And genuinely, it's like people who don't get past the second paragraph where I admit that I'm not a trained historian. They're like, how dare you write a history book? You're not a university professor of history. You're not allowed to do that, And I think that that's something we need to increasingly question. So yeah, I feel two ways about it, but it's definitely like you feel very out there on your own. And again, like, but that's why it was so important to me to get the fact checking done by these more institutional scholars, just to make sure, like, okay, do I really know what I'm doing?
Yeah, the layers of safety and I love that you went and did that even as y'all were going to press. I think it's so intellectually responsible. And that's something that I admire about every video you post, everything you share. It's rigorously researched. If there's any correction, you're making the corrections publicly. We talk about this a lot, like no activist robots, right? Like there's no such thing as being a perfect activist. And really there's so much competing science and scholarship out there. It's very hard to be the perfect scholar too, even as people, delve and mine and excavate the most reliable work. So serious kudos for being willing to go that extra mile and bringing on the voices and the expertise that you did. And also there's something both heartbreaking and I think empowering about having to argue that genocide is bad and then making the choice to argue anyway, even as you're like, this is an absurd exercise. Clearly it's an absurd exercise that we're all still engaging with and grappling in. And it's pulling the veil back. Like it's showing how far we've fallen as a society, but also how much power there is in restating these simple truths as clearly as possible for as many readers and listeners as you can.
Yeah, and that's what sets your work apart, is you make these complex historical and political concepts accessible without losing their depth. You break down things like apartheid, settler colonialism, and Hasbara in ways that people can understand and share. You've said that if more academics took a tour in 6th grade English classrooms, they'd be far more successful in spreading their ideas, which is truly one of your many gifts to the movement and the causes you believe in and the world you exist in. And so I thought it would be interesting to get a little bit of taste of that and also to get a little bit more of what's in your book, Genocide Bad. If you can, in a few minutes, break down the 9 pillars of Hasbara, or Israeli propaganda, that you so well outline in your book.
And
if it makes
refer to the table of contents.
I was going to say, yes.
So I don't miss any. Yeah, so what I did was, and I say like Zionists like trained me to write this book because for the first few months after October 7th, I was just getting thousands of Zionists, and I slowly over time blocked them. But it used to be just every day I would wake up and just like I have to scan through hundreds of Zionist talking points every day. And it feels like a lot until you start to see the patterns. And then you start to realize, they actually only have a few rhetorical moves.
Yes.
So the first of those moves is going to be, who are you to speak on Israel? Which is they're going to try to get you to shut up and just you don't get to talk. And in doing this, they're going to deploy deference politics, which says we have to defer to certain marginalized groups to tell us what to think on certain topics. And the problem with that, as I argue in this chapter, is that then the elites can always give you someone to defer to who's going to tell you to go along with the status quo. In the case of Zionism, they're always going to point to the Zionist. You need to defer to Jews. Oh, you're a Jew? You need to defer to an Israeli Jew. So Oleg and Elon, who are two Israeli anti-Zionist Jews who have a podcast called Yalla, and they were saying on their podcast that within Israel, they're told, oh no, you're not allowed to speak about Israel because you've never lived outside Israel. So you don't know what anti-Semitism is like in the real world. So no matter where you are, no matter how Jewish you are or not, like someone's going to gaslight you into saying you are not enough. You are not qualified to speak about Israel. And we just have to reject that politics altogether. The second chapter and the third chapter kind of are different flavors of ways that Israel deploys this sort of this deference politics, this weaponized identity politics. So the second chapter is called Marginalized Human Shields, which talks about how Israel, and it goes into deep about pinkwashing, but Israel will also tout, we have the gayest military in the world. Look at these Black soldiers who are committing war crimes. Look at these female bomber pilots who are blowing up apartment buildings, #girlboss. And so that strategy is sort of what I address in that chapter and going particularly deep on pinkwashing. In the third chapter but Israel is so diverse. And this is particularly addressing the charge that Israel can't be an apartheid state because Israel is so racially and ethnically diverse, supposedly. And it's really just pulling that apart. I talk about the difference between colorism and racism, how both come to play within Israeli society and government. Wow. I expose just because Israel has diversity, and Israel does have a white ethnic minority, but they are overwhelmingly in power. The white Ashkenazi minority in Israel is economically and politically far overrepresented compared to these other ethnic groups. So that's a pretty flimsy piece of Hasbara that falls apart when you just really look into what is how the apartheid state operates. The fourth chapter is called But the Holocaust. And it's all about the specific cynical weaponization of our collective trauma in the Holocaust, or not even, I don't even like saying our anymore. Our ancestors' collective trauma in the Holocaust is weaponized against Palestinians. And the really shocking thing one of the most shocking things that I learned over the past year and a half, which is just how much our Holocaust memory keeping is a cynical Zionist exercise. And this became really apparent as just in lockstep across the entire globe, every Holocaust museum, I think, has refused to name what is happening in Gaza a genocide, have disinvited Shoah survivors who wanted to mention the genocide in Gaza, who wanted to speak out in solidarity with Palestinians. It's been really appalling to realize just how much that historiography, that history making, is rooted in very cynical imperialist, goals.
Industry,
which of course Norman Finkelstein has done so much excellence. The fifth chapter is on bogus history, which is how so much of the narrative that Israel tells about its founding and its history is just lies and distortions. And so I focus in particularly on the 6 Days War, because the version that I was told about that growing up is so disconnected from the reality of what happened.
Yep.
So that was
one of the biggest fights I've ever had with my father is about literally that. Yes.
Literally that.
Wow.
Yep, literally that. Thanks, Sim.
Did you get him to read Holiday's book? I got my dad to read Holiday's book, and that was...
You know, I'll add that to my to-do list. I love my father. I don't know how optimistic I am about capacity for that. But,
okay, the 6th chapter is everybody's favorite. Everybody's favorite. And it's called But Hamas. And it's about probably the most frequent bit of Zionism I encounter, which is someone saying, but Hamas did this or that. You're trying to talk about Israel's crime, and they're going to try to divert your attention to whatever Hamas is or is not doing, whatever they're claiming. And that chapter initially was super short, because it was like me just saying, they're trying to divert your attention from Israel's massive and plentiful war crimes towards like one incident that may or may not have happened. Don't get in the weeds. Like, stay focused, stay on target. But then I ended up thinking, I really need to talk about armed resistance and the legitimacy of armed resistance and the power imbalance between violence that comes from Israel and violence that comes from an indigenous people whose land has been stolen, who are under occupation. There's nuance. There's a lot of nuance there. So that chapter, I think it ended up being taking me the longest and being one of the most sort of transformative writing experiences. A lot of people have really resonated with that chapter.
Wow.
Chapter 7 is Won't Anyone Think of the Colonizers? This is, again, another distracting tactic. So we're worried about an actual genocide happening right now, and your Zionist debate partner is going to ask you to imagine a future genocide against Israelis that is hypothetical. Yep. And it's about not getting drawn into the weeds there, and also looking a little bit at the history of other anti-colonial struggles and how this, there's always a fear of this reverse genocide happening. But when you look at the history of anti-colonial struggles, it really doesn't happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the 8th chapter is the longest chapter, and that one's the most memoir-y, and it's criticizing Israel as anti-Semitic. And in that, I talk about growing up in a very in a town where I was surrounded by Christians. I was like the only Jewish kid in town, and I dealt with a lot of interpersonal anti-Jewish hate, which led me to becoming a anti-Semitism educator online, which is what I used to be. I used to get paid by Jewish organizations to come do talks on combating anti-Semitism online. Organizations that would now never
seriously
invite anywhere. But I became an expert on that because it was something I faced, but always in an interpersonal way and always from Christians. What's happening in Palestine is very different. Anti-Jewish hate in the US is a white supremacist Christian phenomenon. Resistance to Israel and Palestine is about resistance to settler colonial occupation, and these are not the same things. And then that chapter goes all the way back to medieval Jewish history and the early Christian church and imperialism and all this stuff. And it's making all these parallels and basically arguing that if you want to fight anti-Jewish hate, you have to fight Zionism. Zionism is the biggest threat to Jews worldwide. Which I know, Katie, you often write about those sorts of things. And then chapter 9 is the idea that Jews are entitled to Palestine. And so we look at 4 different claims. We look at Jews are entitled to Palestine because of the Bible. No, the Bible does not say that. Jews are entitled to Palestine because of international law. No, international law does not say that. We look at Jews are entitled to Palestine because they are indigenous to Palestine. And there we say, you do not know what the word indigenous means. And no, they are not. And then the 4th argument is Jews are entitled to Palestine because if they were born there, if you were born there and that's where you've lived all your life, what are we going to do with you? So that's the last chapter, kind of reckoning with that. And it's talks about misunderstandings about what land back and decolonization and collective liberation even means. So those are the 9 pillars of Hasbara that I take on in the book.
Wow. Wow.
That's amazing.
Absolutely incredible. Oh my goodness. And thank you so much for walking us through each one of those, and the thoughtfulness and obviously the passion and the research that you did for all those things. And again, like just the way that you articulated so many of those concepts, even for me that has read a lot and knows a lot, you gave me new language to communicate some of these things when I'm faced with this propaganda, especially that deference piece. For me, like that was the one that just hit me the most. And it's something that I can use, especially in the people around me, because I'm surrounded by, people that believe some of these things, if not all of them. I have friends that believe in all of these things. And so thank you so much for giving me that to disarm those kind of arguments. Your point about academics needing to learn from 6th grade teachers is so spot on also. There's this assumption that making things accessible means making them less serious. But you prove that's not true at all. It's truly about making them accessible, tangible, and easy to absorb so that they can feel both relatable and actionable.
And you have already established a tradition of doing this on your own. So your novel, The Free People's Village, imagined an alternate timeline where Al Gore won in 2000 and Houston became this hub for climate justice. It's described as solar punk fiction, which is imagining better futures. And now you're fighting for justice in the present moment with your Palestine activism. How do you see the connection between the capacity to imagine a better world and the commitment to fight for them? And do you think your experience writing speculative fiction helps you envision what a free Palestine could actually look like?
100%. 100%. Yeah, my first 3 books were all sort of dystopian mostly dystopian climate fiction. A novella, a novel, and a collection of short stories. But as I was writing the collection of short stories, which is the 3rd book that I wrote, I was like, it's easy to write a sci-fi dystopia. It's easy to look at the future and say, yeah, things are bad and they're continuing to get worse. And it started to feel almost like just repetitive. And like, I got interested in the idea of solar punk, which is, what is it like to do the opposite and imagine that things actually got better? And I found that it was so difficult. It was so difficult. And I also around that time really discovered and got into the work of Ursula K. Le Guin, who did a lot of this utopian writing. I read The Dispossessed, which is about an anarchist, a capitalist planet with an anarchist moon. And she really showed me an image of what does a society outside of capitalism really look like. Like I really saw that for the first time in that book. And I wanted to find more literature like that and help contribute to that body of literature. And The Free People's Village is a novel that's like, it's solar punk, but it's really only like a quarter of the way there. So that line is like Al Gore won the 2000 presidency, but basically not that much has changed is the premise of the book. Like the only things that have changed are really superficial between the George Bush presidency and the Al Gore presidency. And rather than going to war with Iraq, we went to war in Brazil. And there's like sort of more greenwashing across U.S. society, but there's less, there's not a lot of substantial movement away from fossil fuels or any of these things. So that book was part of my ongoing thesis that, like, Democrats will not save us. People after the last election rediscovered that book and found that it was very, very relevant to them. It's also about a student encampment movement that breaks out. Not a student, but an encampment movement that involves a lot of stuff. And young people. So it ended up being sort of very prescient to the events of the past year and a half. But it only prescient because it was based on the Occupy movement, the Black Lives Matters movement of 2013 to 2020. Like, having been a part of those movements, you kind of see how politics works, and you see how the United States works, and how protest movements works, and these things come in cycles. So it ended up feeling very relevant again. Gosh, I forgot the question. What are we talking
about? So the second part of the question is, do you think your experience writing speculative fiction helps you envision what a free Palestine could actually look like?
Yeah. And like I say in the book, like I don't imagine a collective Palestine as much as I sort of imagine collective liberation. Because I do feel like I am not Palestinian. I'm not like Palestinians should be the ones to determine what a free Palestine should look like. But I think that when Palestinians are, if something I say at the end of the introduction is, if we can free Palestine, we can free the world. If we can't free Palestine, we're all fucked. And I truly believe that. And for me, like, and I spend the last part of the book meditating on like, what is my vision of collective liberation? And it is definitely that I have been aided by my work writing speculative fiction in this field and sort of working through, like I'm an abolitionist. And so one of my short stories in my short story collection is about like a community responding to a potentially like scary, violent person in their midst without resorting to some kind of police. What does that look like? So when you have worked through some of those problems in fiction, you can more easily imagine these systems. But in order to get good at writing that kind of fiction, I actually had to read a lot of like leftist praxis and like leftist theory. Also reading a lot of like indigenous history and indigenous theory and indigenous voices of things like the Red Nation podcasts and things. Cause, there are, of course, we don't have to reinvent the wheel on how to organize ourselves outside of capitalism. There have been many, many societies, including very complex societies that, organize themselves socially and economically and continue to this day in different ways that do not, rely upon mass exploitation and overconsumption and oppression.
Yeah.
So, so I think if you want to get good at building a better world, start there. Look at what's been done. Look at what's been tried. Read the leftist theory, read the history, read the fiction, the authors that have like tried to paint pictures of better worlds. Look into solar punk. And there's solar punk, and there's also Afrofuturism and indigenous futurism, which are all similarly utopian genres of writing. And, it's like a practice. There's a common saying, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, which I think for 99.9% people, that is very, very, very true. But you have to like practice your imagination. You have to practice liberating your mind from these systems. And I think for the viewers of this podcast, it'll be very healing, because what I've found reading leftist praxis, like there's like one essay I can think of by Françoise Verger about abolition. No, it's Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who's a Black radical scholar who writes about abolition geography. And she says, don't spend your life waiting until you can draw a line around your entire country or the entire world and say, here we are free. She says, we have to become more precise geographers. So you need to start by drawing a circle around your own head and being able to say, here I am free. And then maybe you can draw a circle around you and your family, your nuclear family. Can you draw a circle around you and your children and say, here we are free. Here we are not cops, and then when you can do your family, can you draw a circle around your community and say, here we are free, and become more precise geographers. And if all of us are working on liberating our families and our communities and our friends from these coercive, oppressive capitalist systems, building mutual aid networks, building solidarity and collective power, then eventually all those little blobs will start to connect. Maybe we can become a big mass movement. Maybe we can free the whole world.
It's giving tikkun olam. It's giving it's giving post-carceral systems, which is just so gorgeous. And the threads of praxis that you're able to pull through your work and of the generations of liberatory thinkers that came before and really set these foundations. Like you do such great work in honoring them and acknowledging them and pushing to what is next. Like that is this thread in Genocide Bad. It has pulled through your other works as well. And there's something so stunning and beautiful about how you've moved from imagining liberated futures to really actively working on liberation in the present. Both require this visionary thinking and a refusal to accept things as they are, a refusal to look at what is in front of you and say, oh, this is what I've been given, and so this is it. And so I'm going to stop the labor here. Like, you're so clearly, in a gorgeous way, unable to do that. Like, you are so able to do whatever is next, and so unable to sit in, well, this is just what I have. And I think that's what's really part of what's contributed to your capacity for not only movement building, but movement leading, though I know you've talked about sort of your reluctance to engage with that space. So it is also one of the reasons why Hani and I were so excited to start Superhumanizers, because of our dissatisfaction with the way things are, and an incapacity to just sit with that and do nothing. So we really wanted to highlight remarkable people like you who are doing this work on the ground and who inspire all of us to imagine this better world and to actually contribute toward it. And so along those lines, we end all of our interviews with what we call a heart share, where we invite our guests to share something that keeps them grounded or motivated. It can be a quote, a poem, a practice, or just a simple truth that helps you stay connected to your purpose when the work does get really hard, and the work does get really hard. So do you have a heart share that you would like to bring to this space?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and it's a psychological strategy that I think gets a very bad rap, which is compartmentalization. But truly, it's so stigmatized, and obviously compartmentalization can be a problem, but it is a survival mechanism, and we need it right now because we're being constantly barraged by the horrible. And I have people who tell me in comments like that they can never stop thinking about it, and they never can experience joy. And I've had those moments over the past year and a half where it's like a constant stream and I can't turn it off. But I think for me, compartmentalization is, it's really important. You know, if you're going to be engaging, if you're going to be, as I am trying to do, bearing witness to genocide on a daily basis and seeing horrors and communicating about horrors on a daily basis, you can't have that top of mind all the time, right? So when I like close my Instagram app and when I'm like offline, it's in a box, baby. Like it's put away.
Lock it up, not to be carceral.
Yeah.
And like the best thing, and the best thing is like I'm with my children, you know what I mean? And I'm in the moment. And like when I'm with them, I'm not, and sometimes it comes up, you know, sometimes it floats up, and then I fall back on like, you know, my Buddhist learnings that I've done. I've really gotten a lot out of the writings of Thich Nhat Hanh. If people are wondering for a place to start with there, but just like, so if I'm like with my child, I'm snuggling my child, and like an image surfaces of a horribly mutilated, you know, a horrible thing that happened to a child her age that I've seen over the past year and a half. You know, I like, you greet it, you acknowledge it, you breathe, and then you let it go, you know? And it's like, I'm here with the miracle of life and the sweetness of my children. Like, I have 3 girls, 19, 8, and 1.5, and they are all friggin' amazing. And they're all funny, and they all love each other. Like, there's no sibling rivalry because the big age gap. I'm a huge proponent of big age gaps. They just adore each other. And being with them and seeing them together is just like, my life is so full of joy. Like, my life is so full of horrors when I'm like talking and writing about genocide. But when I put it down, I really put it down. And then I'm just like with my family in the moment, like appreciating this brief, miraculous thing of being a sentient, carbon-based life form on this 1 in a billion planets in space. Like, you have to take the moments to just be and enjoy that. And even though you are fully aware that there is just the most horrific suffering and injustice and evil going on in the world, you know?
Yeah, the dialectics exist, the awe and the horrors.
The awe and the horror. So it's okay to compartmentalize. It's okay to put it away. I think some people need to hear that it's okay to put it away. It's okay to forget about it and put it down. You need to, like, to be able to keep going long term.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
you'll be able
You're
to, it'll still be there. Like you'll be able to come back to it later. It's not like it's
Yeah.
going anywhere.
Yeah, but I wanted to kind of float this because y'all are like the trained therapy people. So like, what's y'all take on that?
Love it. Yes, 100% agree. I think, and even it's not like you said, oh, when it comes to your mind, force it away. It's like, no, it comes to your mind and you acknowledge it and you name the fact that it's there. And if you stay with it, it'll make you feel some type of way. And right now you're feeling some other type of way and you want to be in that experience. It's just very intentional. And I appreciate, that you, even as you're sharing the skill with listeners, framing this skill with a particular kind of intentionality. And one of the metaphors that I've heard about movements for liberation, or analogies, I guess, is it's like singing in a choir where everyone has to take a breath and you will not hear the breath unless everyone takes it at the same time. And our movements for collective liberation are collective. So that will not happen. Like if you need to take a step back and breathe while someone else is holding the note, that note will be held. You can hop back in. You can help hold it for the next person who has to step back and breathe. And as someone with both mental health treatment training and who has a history as a choral singer and a theater nerd, that metaphor always just hits for me. So yes, and.
Yes, and I would totally echo that. I would say we must compartmentalize. If we're always in that genocide space, then how do we come back to the justice work and the strength to have that work? And the nervous system responds to the genocide witnessing with fight or flight. And so if we're always in fight or flight, we're going towards breakdown. That's just like a very basic nervous system concept. And what I'm seeing a lot of, especially these days at the national level, is like joy as resistance. And I know, Katie, you love this and you speak to this so well. So I'm going to borrow a page out of your book and say that joy is resistance. Joy is what fuels resistance. And when I think about like within this like pro-Palestine space, when we celebrate Palestinian culture and heritage, when we go to a Palestinian book fair, right? Or when we go to a Palestinian heritage fair or whatever it is, we know the genocide is happening, but we go there and we eat the food and we celebrate the culture and we celebrate the history and we read the books. And that celebration is also what keeps our resistance going. So it's important for us to not just compartmentalize, but to also experience joy in our lives so that it keeps fueling the movement. And especially, also outside of this whole like justice-oriented work is just being present. I love your focus on Buddhism, Sim, because I'm a meditation practitioner and I very much believe in presence as a form of resistance. And so when you're there with your children and you're absorbing your children in that way, when I'm here with my goats, when Katie is there in Paris enjoying her Prosecco, there's something really powerful and beautiful about that and keeping us going when we go back into the space of genocide and the work we do with each other. So thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to share a heart share about something that comes from your book, actually. Your followers on social media, who you dearly refer to as your, I hope I say this right, your mispacha. Did I say that right?
Mishpacha.
Mushbacha. Your mishbacha, which means family in Yiddish, helped you raise $500,000 for pregnant women in Gaza. Your book ends with a profound reflection on your experience giving birth compared to theirs, and how all our babies and their mothers deserve the same gentle, supported welcome to the world. But that's not how they meet the world in Gaza, these babies or these mothers. Your book ends with notes from the families of babies born during the genocide in Gaza. You said, I wanted to hand the mic over to some of these parents and close out by letting them speak directly to you, my English-speaking audience. And since our Superhumanizer community are also the same audience, I wanted to read one of your notes from the book with your permission. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is about Elena. Elena was born on June 8th, 2024 in Gaza to parents Naveen and Wasim. The following was written by her father, Wasim Mahmoud Hamed. When any war starts, our children become the weakest point affected by hostilities, falling within the sights of countless dangers and deprived of the most beautiful years of childhood. Therefore, the protection of children is important, without a doubt. Our children are the present and the future, They must enjoy a decent life like your children. They've been deprived of everything. It's enough that their lives have been robbed. So all we wish is that we as parents and the whole world can help our children get out into a safe life and a bright future soon and away from any wars. Please save us before it's too late. Thank you for giving them a voice, my dear Sim. Katie, my dear, what about your heart? What wisdom is it going to share with us today?
So, first of all, that is gorgeous and gutting. I think I'm really sitting in the dialectics or the duality of this conversation, which is always always tense. And I know I do talk a lot about the importance of joy work and pleasure work in staying in movements for liberation. But I also encourage people to be insightful. Like if you're noticing yourself saying joy is resistance, joy is resistance, joy is resistance, and you've never been to a protest and you haven't made a phone call and you aren't contributing to art and you aren't educating your community and you aren't like showing up in these tangible or informational ways, you're not raising consciousness, you're not contributing to mobilization, then I don't know that your resistant joy is resistance or means anything. So if you know that you're using joy or like the framing of self-care as a buffer against accountability, you owe yourself radical honesty about that. You owe your community radical honesty about that. And I think that segues into my heart share, which is I've been spending a good amount of time in Paris with a group of anti-Zionist Jews and Israelis who are Israeli Parisians who contribute to 2 weekly protests in Paris. And I will say these folks also refer to themselves as like people from occupied Palestine or people from the state that is called Israel. They are not deeply tied to this label of, Israeli Parisians.
Wow.
There's a weekly march at République in Paris every Saturday. And there's a weekly vigil that I came from right before we recorded this episode. That's a mile-long walk in a loop. We walk in a circle in front of Saint-Michel, that square, every Sunday for half an hour, and then hold informational signage for 5-10 minutes. So in a touristy area so that people who are walking by can get some information about the ongoing genocide. And the number of people I heard today speaking in different languages just from seeing this very visible protest of, they're talking about Israel-Palestine, they're talking about the genocide in Gaza, they're talking about wanting these arms to stop flowing into Israel, they're talking about, sanctions against Israel as a state. It was clearly such an effective consciousness raising mobilization effort that really touched my heart. And this group of anti-Zionist Israelis is led by an ex-Israeli occupation force officer who I've had the privilege of getting to know, who really came into his anti-Zionism and Zionist criticality within the last few years, is new to this work and has shown up every week for weeks and organized other anti-Zionist Israelis to show up publicly in France, where it is very dangerous to be Zionist critical in public spaces, and is doing this work on the ground. And we were talking about his service in the IOF earlier today, and he has such an immediate, like, visceral shame response when he talks about it. Like, he went from looking me in the eye and really engaging to, like, not being able to engage in this conversation. And I was like, look at what you're doing now. Like, you understand what you were contributing to before and have acknowledged this and are funneling it into direct action so that, and he put it as, if we're out here speaking as anti-Zionist Israelis and imagining a different future for this occupied space, even with the dismantling of the Israeli state, it gives French and Parisian politicians more legitimacy when they say, these policy changes are not anti-Semitic. Look at the Israelis and Jews that we have out on our streets in Paris demanding these policy changes and these sanctions. It winds up being a political process, even as these systems are, really broken. And so that is what has been weighing on my heart today, and also alleviating, frankly, some of the weight on my heart is seeing how engaged people are in Paris, knowing that so many of these people who are very engaged and who are leading these movements on the ground and contributing are Israeli, that they themselves are critical of labels like Israeli, that they are, really trying to give cover to Parisian politicians so that they can do the work that needs to be done so that Israel no longer has access to these arms. it's systemic work, and we need every single person to contribute. So yes, joy is liberation, rest is liberation, pleasure is liberation, and make sure you're part of the systems that are moving the needle as well.
Yay.
Well said.
Well said.
Thank you. So to our heartful community of superhumanizers, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. And thank you, Sim, for allowing us to take up more of your time than anticipated.
Yes.
To our listeners,
Great.
if this conversation moved you, please share it, rate us, leave a review, and most importantly, find ways to get involved in the movements for justice that you believe will further a better world. And we will end, as we end every pod, with our closing prayer. May all beings everywhere thrive in peace, dignity, and share in all our joys.
And may we see true peace in the Middle East for all in our lifetime. Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you for having me. A wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Great way to
spend
spend an afternoon.
Thank you. And thank you for
I
all
so
your
appreciate your
generosity with
time.
your time. Yeah, seriously. Jenks on that.
We love you.
Okay.
Hey Superhumanizer, it's Katie Bogan here. Before you go, I have a quick ask. If today's conversation moved you, would you please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser? Both links are in the show notes, and your reviews really help us to reach more people who need to hear these stories. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend, a loved one, or anyone who you think would benefit from it. Your reviews and sharing help us inspire more humanity in our world. Thank you for being a friend of Superhumanizer. See you next episode.